As we get going. Alrighty, we are now live.
Hey.
Good to see everybody tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about the second 2012 Virginia Tech Hokie Stormchase trip. And out of that illustrious group, we have three panelists tonight. And I'm going to introduce them starting on my screen, which would be left to right, which I think is usually reversed on whoever's watching. But I'm going to ask them some questions, and we'll just kind of run through this. So. I'm Chris White. For those of you that don't know, I'm hosting this mess, and I got this idea just because I felt like we needed to put some things down, or on recordings to first of all to kind of as a note as to what happened, but secondly as a resource for future Hokie Storm Chasers to know maybe what to expect and how to get ready. Of course, we got the 2015 Hokie Storm Chase that we may have some details about later on this broadcast, but we'll save that for later. So on my left, I have Adrian Engel. So would you just kind of tell us a bit, first of all, where you're from originally, when you graduated from Tech, and what you're doing, where you are and what you're doing now?
Hi, everyone. My name's Adrian, and I'm originally from McLean, Virginia, about 15-ish minutes outside of Washington, D.C. I graduated from Tech in May of 2014, so just a few months ago, and I miss it big time. And right now I am a first-year master's student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Haven't really hammered out the total details on my thesis, but I will be using dual pole radar to look at different signatures of supercells.
Cool.
Oh, and my first, got to mention this too, my first Hokie Storm Chase was in 2011.
Right. And so we're looking forward to seeing Storm Chase accounts from you while you're out there, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'll be sending lots of pictures as soon as I get them.
All right.
Cool. Well, next over on my screen we have, excuse me, have Mr. Jamie Morrow. So if you would just kind of run through the same info for us, I'd appreciate it.
Hey, yeah. Thanks for having me on this one, Chris. My name's Jamie. I'm a two-time storm chaser here with Hokie Storm. I do a little bit on the side back home in Virginia, King George, Virginia, a place that Chris, you know well.
Oh yeah.
Back in good old Dowger and King George area. But I graduated with Adrian here in earlier this past year, and I'm still at Tech actually working on my master's degree in geography. My thesis will be around trying to do some sort of tornado climatology in mountainous areas. Very, very similar to what Catherine actually did, but maybe taking more of a climate look at it than a specific CWA type look. So, what did I miss?
I think that was it. Well, so your first Hokie Storm Chase. This was your first Hokie Storm Chase, right? The 2012 second trip.
Yes, the 2012 second trip was my first. Great experience. Then I also went on the 2014 chase last year, and I was actually a leader on that one. So.
Right. We won't talk about your roommate on this particular trip, will we?
No. We'll keep him in the mystery department.
Okay. And then last, but certainly not least, is you could say she's a veteran of Hokie Storm Chases. And so, although she's introduced herself before many times, I'll ask her the same questions. So, Catherine, would you go next?
Okay, and this is assuming I remember the 10 questions that you asked us to answer. So, I'm just being sarcastic. So, just like Adrian and Jamie, I'm a Virginia Tech Hokie. I'm representing with my VT meteorology mug tonight, right here, with drinking my caffeine, because as you know, it's way past my bedtime. But I love you guys, so I'm here. And so I was originally born in Dayton, Ohio, kind of a frequent drive-by, if we go that route, out to the plains. Lived in Washington, D.C. since I was the age of 10, so just like Adrian, just outside the city, basically. I got my bachelor's and my master's degree in Virginia Tech, graduated with my master's in 2012. And I went on 5 chase trips with the Hokies, so I've seen a lot and done a lot. Adrian was my roommate for several of those trips. Awesome storm chase roomie. We have some good memories from.
Yes, we do.
From long nights in Super 8s, and I'm just happy to be here with you guys again. Oh, and I currently work for the Weather Channel as a weather producer. So there you go.
That was nonchalant.
All right. Well, now that we have the gang back together again,
Yeah.
what we'll do here is I've actually got a write-up that I did more just to keep me straight on what happened on what storm chases, and I'll run through the days day by day as we go through the chase, and I've got it on the computer here to my right, which is why I keep looking in that direction. But if you guys have any other information or details or things that I have missed, make sure you feel free to jump in and fill in details for me. So I've got written down here that we actually on this trip left on Monday, May 28th, which was Memorial Day that year. That was after the first trip. We had gotten back a little bit early on that one, and we turned around and left on Memorial Day. And it's typically because the way the schedule works, we tend to, if we have two trips, we tend to split over Memorial Day. We usually miss a good weather setup because almost always in the plains there's a good weather setup over Memorial Day weekend.
Yep.
And sure enough, this year we missed a good setup again. So we were kind of bemoaning that fact as we were heading out of Blacksburg on that Monday, and of course, because it was a Monday, it was after graduation, and well after graduation, and it was a holiday, so it was kind of interesting to get everybody together. But we did roll out of Blacksburg. Typically, we leave about 9 o'clock in the mornings, pile into the vans, and these three certainly know that that's kind of when you get to know each other, is on that trip, that first day out.
Yep.
You learn all the well, not all of them. You learn some of the idiosyncrasies and all that kind of fun stuff when you spend hours and hours and hours in a van together.
And usually
And
the
you learn
first
to
2
hate Tennessee. You definitely learn to hate
Yes, you do.
Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee is a long state.
Mm-hmm.
Long state.
Yes. If you're fortunate enough to go on the Hokie Stormchase and go on the I-40 route, you will find out just how wide Tennessee is. Yeah.
Yes.
Too wide.
Yeah.
Too wide. So I've got on here that we left with the idea, this was Monday morning, we left with the idea of possibly chasing Tuesday evening or Tuesday afternoon. So we pushed really hard that first day, and we stopped in Clarksville, Arkansas for the night, which I've got written down here was 860 miles the first day.
I was going to guess 864. I knew it was somewhere in there. That was one of the longest first days, I think, that I ever had chasing.
I think however long the actual drive was, I think it took us some like 16 and a half hours, maybe 17 hours, something along those lines.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we kept our, I'm pretty sure we always hit the Mississippi River right at sunset. It seems to happen every time. We crossed right over, so.
Right around Memphis, that's right.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, you got to remember then, that time of year, the sunset's pretty late, but still, it's a long trip along Tennessee, across Tennessee.
Yeah, we know well. We know that well.
And the one note I have about this trip versus the first 2012 trip was that first 2012 trip we had 2 minivans and then a 4-seater Chevy Cobalt, I think. So we had 3 vehicles. I believe this trip we just had the 2 minivans. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So we were dealing with 12 people instead of 16 for the first trip. So it's always fun when you try working the logistics for empty stomachs and full bladders and things like that, is how many stops you have to make. So two vans with 12 people was a little bit easier for this trip.
Yeah. And I hope I'm not jumping ahead on you here, Chris, but isn't that first night the one that we were sitting in there for the evening meeting, and good old Dave Carroll, our lead professor, looks down and looks at something, and his eyes move slightly, and he's like, well, at least it's not hissing at us. That was a great way to start my first Super 8 experience.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, those were the little black roach things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I told Adrian, I was like, just don't think about them. And in the morning, we got through the whole night, and then in the morning, we saw one. And we were like, was that in here all night? But remember, it was injured or something, so we went from being disgusted to feeling bad for it.
Oh, yeah. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
And so we were like, you know what, we'll just leave him alone. We'll just leave him alone over there. He's hurt.
We were just trying to be compassionate.
We were compassionate for that big black roach thing. But
yeah, the ironic is it's the only roach I've run across on any Stormchase since. So, the first one's always the good one, right?
well, you got it out of the way.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Exactly. And you have to realize too that we do not pay extra for those extra people in the room or things in the room.
Right, right.
So well, because that was such a long day, I remember that first night. We usually have for those that don't know or haven't watched, we usually have an evening meeting and then a morning meeting to kind of what happened that day, what's going to happen the next day, and then the next morning is where we're going to go. Kind of cut the evening meeting short because it was so late when we got in the first night. We had a pretty good meeting the next morning to decide where we were going to go. We made the decision that we needed to go to western Oklahoma, but kind of west central Oklahoma from where we were at Clarksville. So hopped in the vans, and I've got it written down here. It was roughly about another 6 hours on Tuesday, and we made it out to west central Oklahoma, where we basically just the convective setup looked good, but we just had to find a place to cool our heels for a while. So we stopped in the little town of Canton, Oklahoma, waiting for things to happen. Now I've got in here. Again, correct me if times are wrong, but about 5 o'clock local time, we started watching. There was updrafts going up, and we picked out one that looked pretty promising.
Yep.
So we finally decided, wait, I think we're going to follow that one. So we pulled out, and I don't know if I got a picture of that one up or not. Anybody have an early picture of that one?
I've got one. Hold up. All right. Got to screen share it here. Here we go. This was kind of the really early stages of that storm. This was right after we pulled out of Canton, which, by the way, fun fact from Twister, this was the Canton where they filmed that part of the movie when the tornado was supposed to go through Canton. We were in it, which was kind of fun.
Right, right. So I remember we pulled off both vans on a side road, and we came down a paved road and we pulled off on a dirt road just to kind of sit and watch. When we came down the main road, we noticed a little fire, looked like some smoke off in the field. And turns out, I think that was caused by a lightning strike. Does anybody remember that?
Yep, that's true. We saw quite a few fire engines go down that way too.
Right. So yeah, because while we were sitting there on the dirt road, the fire engines were whipping by on the main road out there. Because we weren't paying them much attention. We were watching the storm, of course.
Right.
Now, I remember while we were sitting on that dirt road watching the storm, another vehicle pulled up. Anybody remember who was in it?
It was Seth Price.
Pardon, go ahead. Yeah, too many people talking. Who was it?
Seth.
Who's going to say?
Yeah, Seth Price. There you go.
There you go.
He was a Hokie Stormchaser that predated all of us in terms of chasing with Dave. Seth was out there chasing himself, and I guess was following us on the follow the rolling dot on the Dave has on the locator. So he actually caught up with and chased with us that day. It was just pretty cool to catch up with him. And turns out he's from King George too.
Yeah. Another product of good old King George education right there.
Yeah, he survived that too, didn't he?
Yeah.
So meanwhile, that storm kept intensifying, and we stayed on it. And as we kind of jogged south and east on the roads there in west central Oklahoma, I remember the number of chasers started slowly to building. Number of chasers on that storm. First of all, it was just a few, and then as it got bigger, it became like the dominant storm in that area. More and more people started coming on that storm. So I've got here about 7 o'clock that evening, about 2 hours after we were in Canton. We were parking on the side of an east-west highway, and if I can get this to come up, come here. Trying to get screen share to work.
While you are, Chris, let me just give him a little bit of background. Quite a few chasers actually were chasing the Triple Point that day, which was almost in the panhandle of Oklahoma and just north into Kansas, I believe. So a lot of people were farther north and west than we were. And we actually got on initiation just to the south and east of basically the bulk of chasers. And this is what it led to. Quite a few people were chasing us trying to get to the storm in time.
Well, yeah, exactly. And as by the way, here's the look at that storm as it crossed the highway left or right in front of us as we were looking east here. You're right, Jamie. I remember that, and that also resulted in several chasers getting busted, their windshields busted out by large hail as they core punched the storm.
Weather Channel. What? I think Storm Riders got it too. I think both Weather Channel affiliates got hammered pretty hard that day.
Could be, but you're right. We had perfect position on this storm, and this wall cloud and looked like ragged funnel passed by in front of us. I don't know what, 3 or 4 miles east of us. As it headed south, we moved east a bit and caught another southward road. Just kept zigzagging as we were going through that.
Yeah, and Josh Werman and the Rotate crew actually passed us right on that road about 15 to 20 minutes after we parked, watching that thing cross right in front of us.
Well, actually, if you remember, they parked in back of us for a while.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then they decided they wanted to get a little bit closer. So that was kind of cool. You kind of know you're in the right place when you see those guys show up.
Yeah, and it always feels good to beat them there.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's a picture of the crew looking. This is right before that funnel cloud became better defined, and there's Jamie in the red hat right there.
With my janitor keys there.
Oh, too funny. But I remember we were really close, and so if that funnel cloud, turned into a tornado, we would have been right there.
Oh yeah.
I think we had watched that particular wall cloud, kind of produce 3 or 4 varying funnels as it kind of moved across the field and traversed everything right in front of us, which was pretty cool to see. And I remember sitting there thinking, come on, just punch it out. You want to. And I think when we talked about the setup earlier that day, one of the things we mentioned is how high the LCL heights were, and we didn't think that there would really be much of a chance for tornadoes anyway, much less at least just getting a funnel. So I remember thinking about that in my head. It's a high LCL, I know, but I know you just want to touch the ground, just trying to get it to do something. So
yes, storm chasers spend a fair amount of time pleading with the storms to do some things. But.
And Adrian,
that's a good way to put it.
And Adrian, you brought up a good point because when we would have those morning meetings and do the forecasting and look at data, we would always talk about here are the favorable factors and here are the limiting factors. And that day it was the LCLs that we knew were just too high. Right.
Well, as the storm kept growing and kind of heading off to the south and east, we were able to stay in position on it until we got on a road that was instead of a north-south road, I think it was like a northwest-southeast road that was heading directly into Oklahoma City. And we pulled off on that road and watched the storm for a while, and then all of a sudden Dave kind of elbowed me and said, we need to get out of here, and I looked to the left and the hook was coming right at us.
Hold on, and I have a picture of the hook coming right at us. I remember we did a U-turn as quick as we could and punched the accelerator to get out of the way, and you can see the nice teal color, and you can see the beautiful rain/large hail shaft that was coming literally right at us.
Oh yeah, and that picture was about what, maybe 2 miles at the most away at that point, coming fast.
I think it was so close that we looked back, through the back window, and we could see it.
Right.
Kind of across the road.
Right. So we essentially pulled off of that storm because it was heading into the metro areas, and we were not going to follow it, and nor do we want to get hooked in it, either one. So we dove south. I forget what highway that is. Is that 81? Or I can't remember. I'm losing track of highways. But it's the one that goes right directly south to El Reno. And you remember we went down that road and we pulled off. There's a casino that's at the top of a ridge there, and we pulled off there and we kind of we're going to look around the storms, and I kind of happened to glance to the west, and lo and behold, there were 2 other storms with wall clouds heading right for us.
And and there it is, and that's the casino.
Yep.
I have a picture similar, and when I was going through some of my pictures earlier today, I had written on one of them on Facebook that we were literally sandwiched between two supercells. And it was literally like one of them had just come out of nowhere right behind us. So that was pretty cool to just turn around and realize that there was another one with two wall clouds, in very close proximity. Had to do a lot of swiveling of the head back and forth to look at one storm and then look at the other one right behind us.
Right.
Yep. We were that little white dot there. So we've got a TVS signature kind of on the left side, and then on the right side, that was a storm that was headed right toward Oklahoma City.
And that brings up a great point on this one, and that I think Adrian alluded to it, is that when you're on a storm chase and it's actively, there's a lot of convection going on, you have to keep your head on a swivel. You can't get fixated on one part of the sky, because there's things that can happen, other storms that can grow in different directions. These storms that were forming back off to our north and west were actually traveling southeast. They weren't doing this standard southwest to northeast trajectory. They were coming out of the northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to be careful of plotting our trajectory on what roads were available, what egress routes we could get out ahead of them. So, and those storms that were coming from the northwest actually wound up chasing us through the town of El Reno, if you remember that.
Yep.
Because I remember sitting at one of the lights in El Reno, red lights, kind of pounding on the dashboard, saying, come on, turn, because we wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, we had to get out of there.
So we headed on south of El Reno, south of the interstate, down 81, and I forget where it was. I think it was in the little town of like Union Hall or Union City.
Union City.
Sorry, Union Hall's here in Southern Virginia. Union City, and we stopped, and this is the, let me screen share this. This is the view that I took, or the picture that I took looking at the wall cloud coming at us. This is like a beautiful mothership wall cloud just rotating, left edge coming right at us, rotating around. And, of course, there was, as we were traveling south before we pulled off, we actually saw a dust cloud underneath this, which turned out to be pretty much just an RFD, I think, an outflow. But got everybody excited, and we stopped and watched this for quite a while.
Yeah, I remember we stood there pretty much until the sun went down watching this wall cloud.
Right. Yeah, it got close enough, and it wasn't traveling that fast because we knew we had a good north-south route to get out of there. So we waited as long as we could. But then it got too close, and of course then the rain out to the east of it got a little bit too close. So we kept going south, and we found another crossroad, the east-west road, and we pulled off. Remember, we turned west, went a little bit, and stopped, and kind of watched this thing. Literally, it was right after dark, and I remember stepping out of the van. Dave was driving. I remember I was riding shotgun. Dave was driving, and I had my camera, and I immediately started filming or videoing when we got out. And within 30 seconds, this is what we saw. This is a video grab from the frame grab from the video. I'll say that in a minute. And here you can see the funnel, and here you can see the dust clouds. So we had us a tornado, and obviously, as Adrian said earlier, the LCL heights must have lowered from what they were earlier, because now we had some good low clouds.
And I remember we were closer than we probably would have normally wanted to be, because we pulled off to watch the lightning, and we had thought the tornado threat for the day was pretty much over with the LCLs being too high. And I remember Adrian and I, we were standing up on the van together filming, taking video, and we both spotted that at the same time because the lightning illuminated the funnel. And I just looked at Adrian and I said, "Is that?" And Adrian goes, "Yep."
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then not long after this, there was a dust whirl even closer to us, which I think was from the RFD on this storm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the time Dave and I looked at each other and said, "Okay, it's time to go."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was okay, everybody back in the vans.
Yeah.
Back in the vans.
Yeah, one of the back in the vans moments.
Exactly.
Yeah, back in the vans.
But we didn't have Andrew there to complicate things for us. So.
Yeah, we didn't have him to blood-curdling scream it So everyone panicked. No, it was nice and calm.
But we didn't give up on these storms just yet. We went a little further south, pressed on a few more miles south, found another dirt road, east-west road. Actually, it was kind of like almost like a farmer's field, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And we just pulled in there and stopped, probably for, I don't know, what, 20 minutes, half an hour, just to watch the lightning. It was all around us. It was an incredible display that night.
It was awesome.
I almost feel like that whole trip, that 2012 trip, you know, one of the nicknames we could give it is just a lightning trip, because I think there were so many instances when we had, you know, just a beautiful lightning show, and even that, you know, a couple days, I think, where we didn't see anything else, and of course we'll get to there eventually, but it was almost just a lightning show that made it worth it, and I think that was a huge part of that trip. I think at one point, too, when we were looking at that mothership wall cloud, I think one of the reasons why we hopped in the vans is because the lightning was getting a little bit too close. I remember looking at one of the other chasers, Trevor Payton, when there was a strike, you know, far enough away from us, but getting a little bit too close for comfort. And he and I just kind of gave each other this look like, oh, that's not good. So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the themes of that trip, was just the lightning in general. It was always beautiful, and definitely in abundance.
Yes, very, very much so. That's something I always have enjoyed, is a nocturnal lightning storm, and there was a lot of that trip. Yeah. Got anything to say, Jamie? I didn't mean to cut you loose, cut you out, or anything.
Oh no, I'm trying to fight my bandwidth here, so okay. Don't mind me if I'm quiet. I've probably been yapping for the last 5 minutes. You just couldn't hear me.
Gotcha. I gotcha.
No, but one thing I will say about this at least this section of the trip is, while we were seeing all this, the original storm we were on was actually dropping grapefruit-sized hail on the town of Oklahoma City. And if you guys remember, at the time, Oklahoma City Thunder were actually in the playoffs. I believe they're either playing the Heat in the finals or the Spurs in the semifinals. I'm not sure which one, but their roof punctured in several locations by the grapefruit-sized hail, and they ended up canceling or postponing a game. So I know Mike Marston, a graduate friend of mine here at Tech, and he was on the trip with us. He actually was following it pretty closely, and like I said, the storm riders could definitely tell us about how big the hail was at that point. And anybody else that got north of the storm and tried to core punch its way through.
Yep.
Yes. Hence the reason that we, A, don't core punch, and B, avoid hail shafts like crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that night, because the storms kept building and pushing further south, we kept drifting south, and we wound up in Lawton, Oklahoma for the night after dodging a few more hail cores, and made it there and spent the night. And then the next day all of that, by the way, occurred on our second day out.
Yep.
So that was a very busy second day on the road for the Hokie Stormchasers. Next day on Wednesday, which was May 30th, the Storm Prediction Center had put out a moderate risk forecast covering most of the western Oklahoma and a good chunk of southern Kansas. Now, I have to caveat this with saying, if I'm around, moderate risks usually bust. For some reason, they don't like me. So I'll caveat everything else by saying that I have rotten luck with most moderate risks. So
why did we let you come back?
Well,
that's a good question.
Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Chris, I think I actually remember you saying that in our morning meeting, since we were so excited for the moderate risk and so excited for that day. I think you mentioned something, you know, kind of like, oh, I don't know about this moderate risk. Oh, I'm here, so.
Yeah, well, maybe I jinxed it, because we made our decision in that morning meeting, by the way, to head north. We're in Lawton, Oklahoma, of course, is way south in Oklahoma, so we headed north. I remember we stopped when we crossed, or we reached Interstate 40, which, of course, you know, bisects Oklahoma. We stopped there. I think it was a potty break and maybe a lunch break or something. And I remember Dave sitting at the computer, looking up surface obs, looking at satellite, and I think it was Kevin and I don't know who else was around, And we were all, the decision had been made. We were going to go into like northwest Oklahoma, probably I think Woodward area was maybe our target. So we were heading up that direction, but Dave kept looking at these surface obs, and he kept checking out Childress, Texas.
Right.
And the winds, he looked at the obs, looked at the surface winds, and he kept saying, that just looks really tornado-ish. So, but none of us overrode it. So we headed north. Blue sky bust.
Yep.
Not a storm in the sky. Guess where there was a tornado that day?
Childress, Texas.
Childress, Texas. We should listen to Dave.
Yeah.
Well, as I have it here, the write-up, we actually did catch a supercell in the Oklahoma Panhandle right at sunset. We had to scramble to see it. But what actually wound up happening was in western Kansas, a squall line formed very quickly, and of course it wound up being a big mess. There was no way really to chase it. And then these beautiful discrete supercells in Texas, in the Panhandle that Dave had been looking at, and we were in between, So we kind of drove around a little bit trying to decide what to do, and we did find this one particular storm that was in probably maybe a half an hour before sunset in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and just watched that storm and then watched the sunset behind it. And I have to share this picture because it's one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken on a storm chase that we took as that storm was going on, and we saw the Mamatis behind it. And it was just an incredible sunset with the Mamatis overhead and that one east-west highway, whatever that number is. It was just gorgeous, and that made it almost worth missing the tornado. Not almost, not quite.
Yep, and here's mine, the same view, and it was the most spectacular Mamatis field that I'd ever seen. So I remember we were feeling pretty bad about the bus that day, but this made us feel a whole lot better.
Yeah.
I think the nice thing about that too was that cell was pretty much stationary. So we were watching the sunset for a long time, if I remember correctly. And I have another picture that doesn't actually show the Mamatis field, if I could pull it up. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Oh, beautiful.
Keep talking, Adrian.
That was one of my favorite pictures of the day. Of course, the same pictures that we've already seen with the Mamatis clouds were gorgeous, but this was one of my favorite parts, especially since kind of to the right of where the picture is, there were some lightning flashes when we saw some lightning within the clouds, and I didn't get any pictures of the sunset and the supercell with the lightning. I wish I had, but nonetheless, this is one of my favorite pictures probably from that entire trip. In fact, I've used it as my desktop background a couple of times in the past.
Yeah, and I think that was my first Midwest set. And I'm from Virginia, and your sunset lasts about 2 minutes. You see the sun start to go down, and then all of a sudden it's black. It's either going behind a mountain or a hill or a tree line. There's really no way of longer. So when you're out there, it still amazes me how a sun can set for an hour and a half at a time. I mean, you'll see light for quite a long time unless a storm is really blocking it. But we're so close to storms, you can a lot of times see underneath, which is what happened in this situation. Right,
and I have to agree. I think the sunsets out that way, especially in the Panhandle and the high country, high terrain, are just gorgeous, and you can see some sights there that you'll never see back here. I'm looking out the window here. I'm hearing all sorts of sirens and stuff going on, and I'm realizing what's happening. It's December, and what the local fire department does around here is they tour all the neighborhoods with Santa sitting on top of a fire engine. And so that's what's happening in the neighborhood behind me now. I can hear it going on.
2012, go out and get some footage.
Yeah. So, anybody have anything else about that particular day?
Just that I know what you're going to say next. This is our first night in Guyman, Oklahoma.
The Guyman trip.
The Guyman, Oklahoma.
This is the trip we discovered the Super 8 in Guyman, Oklahoma, and set a record for the Hokie Stormchasers, where we stayed in the same hotel for 4 nights in a row. That's unheard of.
Right.
And it was a nice hotel, too.
Oh, yeah. Great hotel, great breakfast, and cheap, which helped the budget as well.
They had breakfast burritos. That's what I remember.
And I very much enjoyed the Queen's Jamboree one on that week that we were watching every morning while we were making our pre-meeting stuff. So.
Now, Guyman was also the town where the tornado sirens would go off at random times, because our first morning there, we were all still sleeping, and I remember they went off, and Adrian and I both at the same time shot up in bed, and it kind of was like, without saying a word, one of us jumped to look out the window, and the other one looked and checked radar scope on our phone, because the sirens were going off. I remember that being pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, there was an old abandoned tornado shelter out behind the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that too once I opened the window. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be sure that nothing was actually coming our way.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Usually storm chasers, we don't pay attention to alerts. You hear sirens go off. What do? We run toward the siren.
Exactly.
So. Well, that next day, May 31st, we knew it was going to be a quiet day, and we'd had a pretty busy time of it the first few days of the trip. So we decided to take a down day on May 31st. So we took advantage of that, and then we went down in the Texas Panhandle to Palo Duro Canyon, which I didn't know until we had been there and looked up the information. That's actually the second largest canyon next to the Grand Canyon in the continental U.S.
Yeah, it was an amazing sight to see, especially seeing that sort of. I mean, the Appalachians are one thing, but you don't see canyons like that around here. And the rocks, they were all that reddish iron color, and it was pretty. There you go. It's a pretty amazing thing to see. We got to drive in there, and if you could keep those green flies from biting you, you were having a good time.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the flies, it would have been a little bit more fun, but no. We had a blast because we actually drove all the way down into the canyon. And actually, Chris, because you mentioned it was a down day, we knew it was going to be quiet because you don't see any towering cumulus in the sky. It's just nice and blue. And they had a gift shop, and it was a great, great trip.
Yeah.
And I think we went down to the bottom. We had lunch down there and kind of hung out for a little bit. So it was kind of a nice change of pace. And, of course, obviously we're storm chasing, we wanted to see storms, but it was kind of nice to see something a little bit different, especially in Texas, because that's just not something you would expect to see.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I believe the ladies' van was the one that decided to cut the trip short, and I remember an uprising by you guys at the end there.
Yes,
there they are.
Yeah, here are the ladies. So I remember we decided that it was time to go and have dinner, our tornado dinner. So we all filed in the van, and we decided to shut the doors in unison to see if Dave would notice. So, of course, he did not get the hint. So, in fact, or I should say instead, Kevin and Chris kind of looked over, and it was like, I think the girls are ready to go. And we were like, yep, we're ready to go.
Yeah, you kind of notice those things.
Yeah, we all know who the bosses were on that.
Exactly. I know how it works.
Yeah, it was the ladies.
But we did head up from there to Amarillo and ate dinner. Had our steak dinner at where?
Big Texan.
Big Texan.
That's right.
Yep.
So we enjoyed that, and was that? Let's see, did we have folks coming around singing that night too?
We did. I think toward the end. I think as we were all paying, the band came. But we didn't have anyone doing the challenge. There was no one up at the table trying to eat the 72-ounce steak in an hour.
Ah, okay.
Which I think Adrian and I were talking. We were kind of glad because you're looking at that table and there are trash cans all around it, ready for the people who can't finish the steak. And we were like, you know what? We're kind of glad that no one's doing that right now.
Yeah, I remember being there.
I to see that.
Yeah, that's right.
We were there on one trip, and there was somebody up there doing it, and it wasn't a pretty sight. So
I still can't get over the record was held by a 7-year-old girl and a 93-year-old grandmother or something like that. That just
totally forgot about that.
That's crazy in my opinion.
But they were behind the cheetah or something. They a cheetah ate it in one bite, or some kind of tiger or lion, and then it was the 7-year-old. And I'm telling you, the ladies, we can eat. What can I say?
Yeah, that's very true. We absolutely can.
Exactly. My daughter could still out-eat me, so.
There you go.
Well, back to storm chasing then. The next day was Friday, June 1st, and things looked a little better than they did the day before. So we again had our morning meeting at the hotel there in Guyman, and decided to head a bit westward to Boise City, Oklahoma, which is pretty much due west, I think, of Guyman, if I remember right. We kind of sat there and watched the convection. We moved west of Boise City a little bit to a road junction to kind of track things. And I remember being just impressed at it. I mean, yes, I've been out there before, but just how far we were seeing, because it's so flat and so clear. You didn't even really need radar. You could see 60 miles in any direction.
Yeah.
So, but I remember, and I've talked to Kevin and Dave about this later. I remember when we got out of the vehicles there was a pretty strong southwest wind blowing. And then after we had been there for, I don't know, a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes or so, the wind basically died. There was no wind at all, and then the flies showed up, of course. But the other thing that showed up, and then not too long after that, a northeast wind kicked in. So it was pretty obvious a boundary had gone through. Mm-hmm. But during that dead time, we saw what we took to be dust devils. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I think I got one of those queued up here to take a look at. This is just one of them that we saw. There was a bunch of them, and they kept, they would fire up, spin up a little bit. Some even pretty obviously multi-vortex, and they kept moving south of us. So when they kept popping up, and when that boundary became evident, my first thought was, are these dust devils? Or are they land spouts? Mm-hmm. And I don't think we ever came to a conclusion that we really couldn't connect them to. There were some towering cumulus to our south, building, I think, just ahead of that boundary. But I'm still suspicious that I don't think they were all dust devils.
Yeah, and right before that picture was taken, Chris, I'm pretty sure we saw it. It went a lot higher than originally, because I know we were driving on the road and we would look up and it looked like it went several hundred feet in the air. And that light doesn't do it justice, because it was much higher than what that looks right there.
Right.
I remember looking at them. They kind of stopped us in our tracks a little bit, because they were moving so fast, and obviously you can see we were pretty close to them. And Jamie, like you said, they were stretching pretty high up there. I mean, they had some nice definition to them.
Definitely.
Yeah. I actually have a better video than I do of pictures of those, but you're right. There was a couple of those tubes that did go pretty far up, but we may have been too close to see them, whether they were actually attached to a towering cumulus over us or something. We couldn't really tell from where we were.
Yeah. And is that this that we got within, I think it was like quarter of a mile of New Mexico? Or, yeah, I remember I've never been, this was my first time west of the Appalachians, so I was psyched to get into a new state, and then, of course, we turned around about a quarter mile from the state line, so I was really bummed on that one.
Yeah, we took one of that south road from that road junction and tracked these storms, and unfortunately we left a little bit too late, because they started exhibiting hail signatures and we were unwilling to punch through them. So we kind of stayed behind them. The storms were out ahead of us, and we stayed behind them as they headed south. And I've got listed down here that, of course I got to change views here. We got near Dalhart, Texas, and in that area, that was kind of the corner where we were near New Mexico. And we started getting pinched off by hail cores and by, I think there was some strong outflow winds too that we had to avoid.
I think this was dropping large hail, because we were thinking this was a hail foot, not a rain foot, but a hail foot coming out of this storm.
Right.
Yeah, beauty of a picture right there.
So if we had actually, before those dust devils or land spouts, whatever they were, had popped up, if we had gone south and been south of that, we probably could have stayed with those storms. But as it was, there was no way we could keep up with it with a road system and everything pinching us off. So it's another factor in storm chasing to keep in mind, is that the storms don't always behave with respect to the road system that you have available. So let's see. I have, on my next day, which was Saturday, June 2nd, we had our morning planning meeting again in Guyman after our plenteous breakfast. And
right.
we decided to head up into southeastern Colorado, because it looked like things were going to happen along dry line there. In fact, most of this actually looked like it was along a dry line. That's pretty much what happens that early June there in the Panhandle area. So we I remember going to Springfield, Colorado, which is kind of a favorite little place. Found a little park, municipal park, where we settled, had lunch. I remember the frisbee and football throwing around, and just a typical what's the Hokie Stormchasers do while we're waiting for storms to fire. And then I have something in my notes. I just remembered. I had forgotten about this trip. We headed back. We headed through Springfield, and then we went west of town, I believe, for a ways on another east-west road to kind of watch the storms. And then, as we were watching these particular storms, they were kind of coalescing on another squall line. But while we were sitting there, this farmer pulls up. He was pulling a cattle trailer. There may have been a couple of cattle in it. I don't remember. But he pulls up and he comes over and he starts talking to me, which is fine. All of us like talking to the locals, and that's one of the things I think that you guys and a lot of the other students have done. Have done an excellent job of being an ambassador for tech, talking to the locals and answering their questions. Are there going to be storms? Are there not going to be storms? All those kind of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This guy was rather interesting. I don't remember the entire conversation because I kind of backed away from him a little bit. But the gist of it was that he was really ticked at the federal government because they were pulling all sorts of secret stuff to cheat the farmers out of their lands, and because they were going to build a secret base out there in southeastern Colorado, and they were doing anything they could do. And about this time, I'm starting to retreat around the edge of the van. Okay,
you're like, okay, back away.
You're not experienced with the government at all, anyway, Chris, are you?
No. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation. I'll just put that. I had forgotten about that till I went through my notes about this.
Yeah. And this trip, if I remember correctly, I think missed a day, but I think we picked up a couple of unwanted friends that were following us around these a couple of the days on this trip. If you guys remember correctly.
I don't remember what specific days. Do anybody else?
Well, one was in Colorado because I remember parking at the grassy park area that we were, and the guy came. And he was just sitting there watching us for about an hour. He then went, grabbed his girlfriend, and they both had a picnic while we were having a picnic. And as soon as we hopped in the car really fast, they were right on our tail for about 20 to 30 miles. So it was quite an experience. Then we also ran into the same people on multiple occasions in different states, once or twice. So we were it was a little fishy, but it kept everything interesting.
Creepers gonna creep. Just remember that.
Well, it is kind of hard to hide when you have these things sticking up on top of the van with whirly things going around, with the mezzanines.
That scream storm chasers. Follow us.
That's right. Exactly. So we finally wound up that day north of Springfield. That as the squall line kind of came toward us, and I don't know if I got a picture of this or not. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, here we go. There was a really cool view of one wall cloud that looked like it poked its way out of the northern edge of the squall line. And then as a result of that, I was able to grab this shot of Mamatis over the vans.
Oh, yeah, that's right. This had a beautiful Mamatis field.
It did. It was, and we were where we were sitting was the shelf cloud and the outflow came through. It was pretty strong, but that Mamatis field was just gorgeous. I enjoyed it.
I think that was probably the best, at least in my opinion, maybe other than the Mamatis field we had seen with the sunset storm earlier that week. I think that was the best viewing of the modest that I had ever seen. And I actually have a picture similar to Chris's, although I'll pull it up real quick.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adrian. It's probably those two shots were probably the most beautiful ones that I've seen.
Yeah, this is one that I took directly underneath the van, underneath the mezzanette. I think I might have been standing up on the edge of the door, but I just wanted to try to get a picture of what was right above us, since I think that was the first time I had ever actually seen a modest field directly above my head. So that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the trip as well.
That's awesome. And I know right after the modest field, as we kind of turned around, we decided to head back south. The kind of the squall line, that leading edge of the cloud, came right over us. So then we were under the whale's mouth, and it just looked wicked.
Right. I think I actually took a picture. I think you're in it, and a couple of the other girls. I can't remember who they were. Of looking, kind of I was squatting down, looking up at you guys with the whale's mouth, kind of passing by overhead. That was pretty awesome.
Oh, nice.
I didn't pull that one up, but if you want it, I can send it to you.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, because of the way things formed, with that squall line forming and coalescing and really not being chaseable after this point, we were done early that day. So we actually went back to Boise City, Oklahoma, and had a rare dinner while we were actually chasing. And that's another thing to bring in mind for Hokie Stormchasers in the future, is that you just have to realize you don't always eat on time. Breakfast is usually at the hotel, whatever is at the hotel. Lunch is whenever you can stop at either a convenience store or eat out of the vans, because we usually pack a pretty good spread for sandwiches and stuff like that. But dinner, don't count on eating dinner if we're chasing storms.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best you could do is a pack of crackers and a bottle of water. That's about it.
Yeah, that's what we settled in on when we were running away from that North Oklahoma City storm. The second day we were out there, I think it was Tuesday. Well, I don't think we had dinner, because by the time we pulled into that southern Oklahoma town, we ended up, it was like 11:45 or well after midnight. We were all exhausted. It was a long day, so I don't think anybody ate dinner that night. So it's just one of those things. Don't tell your parents, but it was.
Right.
You don't always think about food either. If the adrenaline's pumping, you're just going to keep chasing.
Right. And Jamie brought up one thing here in chat that we ought to bring up. I think it was actually the day before this, June 1st, if I remember right. There at the hotel in the parking lot in Guyman, Oklahoma, we met Tim Samaras and his chase crew. He was there. I think he was there with his lightning detection vehicle. I think that was the one he had there, that truck. And just a very, very nice guy. Answered questions, talked to us. Just very down to earth, just a lot of fun. I remember talking to him about the fact that particular day that we were kind of, storms where we were there in the Panhandle were kind of dicey, but my son was probably chasing back in Virginia because it looked like there were some good storms back there. And I remember talking to him about that.
Yeah, we're not going to bring that up.
That always happens.
It does.
But I guess the eerie part about it was almost a year to the day after that when he was killed in the El Reno tornado.
Yeah, and we were in El Reno just a couple days before, running away from that first storm that we saw. So
right.
And one of the most impressive things that I remember about him, and KP, let me know if you have a different story here, but I remember eating with Mike Marston, Trevor, and I. We were just eating an early breakfast, about to head to the meeting, had our laptops out. We were discussing the day, doing our typical pre-stuff. And this guy comes in and sits down a table away, and just, you could tell he's listening to us. But he wasn't chiming in, typical meteorology awkwardness, nothing out of the ordinary for us. And Catherine comes down, sits at our table, and I think someone gets up to walk away, and she's like, "Hey, do you know who that is?" And I'm like, "No." And so he walks away. I'm like, "Yeah, that's Tim." And he was just sitting there quietly, didn't really talk with us that much, but he was really trying to absorb, and he always had a good look on his face. And it really was a pleasure meeting him, and he was very generous and gave everybody a tour of his truck that asked, and it was great to see him. I think we actually stayed 2 nights in Guyman while he was there. We definitely talked to him the second day, though.
Yeah.
And we not only talked to Tim, but also Carl.
Yep.
And Carl was also personable and great. And I remember when we were eating breakfast, we had our laptops, and he and Carl had their laptops, and we were kind of, like what are they looking at? What websites are they using? Should we like ask them, and then we can bookmark the sites that they use? So yeah, just great guys.
Yeah, he really was. Well, back to this chase that we finally had dinner on June 2nd. After we stopped in Boise City, then we needed to roll eastward back to Guyman. And we got to a point on that east-west road where we basically had to stop. We were literally surrounded by supercells.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember stepping outside, out of the van, and doing a 360 with my video camera, and there were literally storms at every point of the compass.
Yep.
All the way around us.
I remember there was a pretty big debate going on who was going to get the best lightning strike picture, because I had my camera pointing west, and Mike would have his camera pointing north, and Catherine's over here southeast, and Chris is looking to the northeast, and everybody was trying to get the best lightning shot, and there was some beautiful lightning, especially once the sun went down officially. But man, that was an incredible experience. We were surrounded, and I remember we had to get back in the car and move because we were getting hit. We were getting hit by the tail of some storm. I don't know which one it was, but we were definitely getting hit toward the end, right?
Yeah, we were. As a matter of fact, the supercell that was to our east, we had to let that one cross the road so we could, because it had a hail course, so we could continue east, but we needed to continue east because the one to our south was heading toward us. Yeah. So it was a timing thing. So, and as we headed east, I was driving, and it got totally dark. And I was really jealous of everybody else in the van because they could all sit and watch the lightning, and I'm just getting lit up from the left. I just couldn't see anything, but I'm getting these flashes in my left eye. It was gorgeous. It was a very, again, as Adrian said, it was another example of a good lightning storm.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I actually remember trying to get pictures of the lightning itself, and I couldn't. So I just started using my phone. And Jamie, I think you were sitting next to me, and I started using my phone just to take video, and I wanted to go back later on and look at what pictures I had, and I was able to get a screenshot of this one in particular, trying to make it a little bit bigger here, but you can see in the upper right hand corner the radar that Jamie and I were looking at in the background, the reflection of the window. So yes, we were still working as we should have been to dodge these storms, but this was one of the best lightning grab pictures that I had taken from my video camera.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I got this one. It's not necessarily a great one in terms of showing definition of lightning, but it shows just how bright. I mean, my camera didn't know what to do with it because it just was so close, and you could see all the streamers coming off, and you can see the main bolt, and I remember just feeling blinded at times because it was so bright.
Yeah, think how I felt when I was trying to drive in that.
And it's just on the one side. You're getting like an aura.
Yeah, exactly.
On one side.
Exactly. But that was nice. That was really cool, and I knew everybody was impressed because I kept hearing oohs and ahs coming from the back seats.
Yeah.
So, well, that next morning, Sunday, June 3rd, we finally bade goodbye to Guyman. And sadly, Guyman and the sausage biscuits and all the other stuff for breakfast. We did. I remember that our morning meeting, everything looked pretty promising that day. The models looked good. All of the forecast discussions around the area were looking good. And even the Storm Prediction Center had a pretty good chance for supercells somewhere in the eastern Kansas, Oklahoma area. So we, let's see, I'm trying to think. We went up into Kansas and started heading east, and then I remember we stopped and looked at the satellite and the radar, and it was like, oh crap! There was rain showers starting to fire up about, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is never a good sign if you're waiting for things to fire from storms.
Right.
So it was just basically messing up all the potential in that area for that afternoon. So, and actually, where we stopped, I have it, my note here, we have it in Pratt, Kansas.
Pratt, your favorite, Chris.
Hey, so you got to touch base in Pratt if you're going to have any kind of decent storm chase. Although That wasn't true this year. We never went into Kansas, but
woo, woo, woo! Sorry. That was good forecasting on my part.
So we wound up. We kind of made a command decision. Again, this is another reason why you stay on top of things as you go. You keep looking at models, keep looking at surface observations and satellite pictures, because things might change. So we made a change on the fly. Instead of heading into eastern Kansas, we dropped south into northwestern Oklahoma in hopes of catching something on the dry line that day. Mm-hmm. So we did wind up on a storm. In fact, I think I've got it here. If I look at it, pull it up. We did wind up on a severe storm that day. However, it was, as we were rolling up to it, it was dying. That was the only problem. But it was in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and here we're rolling up north to it. You can see the lowering there, and then the back edge over in here with some. It was a very LP storm, a little bit of precipitation under here. But this storm, as I remember when we got there and finally got to it before it died, was literally, after all the driving we had done, less than 2 hours from Guyman.
Yes, I remember that day we literally did a square. Like we drove north and then east and then south and then back west to catch a storm, and we even debated going back to Guyman that night.
We did. Yeah. We did. But we can't say we were totally skunked that day, because we did see this severe storm. Although it wasn't. It was a severe warm thunderstorm, but it wasn't that impressive. But it was kind of cool to see, because I remember looking when I took this picture. Obviously, I wasn't driving when I took this picture, but I looked at radar and looked at picture. We were still almost 20 miles from it. That gives you an idea of scale.
Yeah.
So.
Somebody refresh my memory. Is this the day that we spent quite a bit of time talking at a Dollar General parking lot in Kansas? If I remember correctly, there was a day that we had a lot of issues deciding on whether to go north toward storms that were about 3 hours away in central Kansas, or south, which are about 3 hours away in central to western Oklahoma. And, I mean, it's not always, we're not always on the same page, and there's a lot of differentiating opinion. And those who are about to go this year, you should realize that, having a different opinion is not a bad thing. And I believe the only tornado warning that went out, and there was no tornado reported, was actually in central Kansas. And we wouldn't have made it unless we went straight there. But I believe this is the day, Chris. Do you have a different opinion on that?
I'm drawing a blank on that one, Jamie.
All right. Well, maybe I was dreaming. I was in the back seat.
I was being in a gas station parking lot for a pretty good amount of time, and I think it was that day. But
yeah.
And it was thundering, really loud, right?
Yeah,
it was thundering,
I think
and
so.
It was kind of cool. And I will show the picture of that dying storm, just because we kind of knew it was time to bail off, because it was giving us the thumbs down.
Forgot about that.
We were kind of like, all right, we're out. We're gonna leave this storm now.
Yeah.
But it again had a pretty sunset, and we almost had a near fire ant catastrophe when we took pictures of that sunset. But luckily, nothing big.
Yes, that's the other thing, is when you step out of the vans out there, you definitely need to make sure you know where you're putting your feet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that we usually tell people that, especially because we got to pull off the road and get off into the scrub a little bit, so to stay safe. So you always have to watch where you put your feet.
Fire ants and rattlesnakes.
Exactly. Well, we thought that was the end of our day. It was really just beginning.
Yeah.
Because the narrative that I wrote after that, it looks very busy for what we were considering. Because we said, okay, well, we're done. The storms are done. We're going to call it, and so we're going to book some hotel rooms east of Oklahoma City near Interstate 40, because we're going to boogie back and start heading back toward Blacksburg. Well, while we were thinking about that and heading in that direction, a bunch of big supercells with humongous hail on them came up and were basically pounding I-40 in the area we wanted to go to.
Yep.
So we said, nah, not doing that. So what we decided to do is say, okay, well, we're going to go into northeastern Oklahoma, and we're going to cut across there and go in that direction and head toward Blacksburg. So we actually booked hotel rooms, and I forget where we had them booked, what town it was.
It was in Bartlesville.
Bartlesville, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we were heading toward Bartlesville, and lo and behold, another round of severe storms popped up over that area, which included not only hail, but flooded rains and flooding out roads,
Yeah.
which meant we couldn't get there from where we were coming from western Oklahoma. So literally in the mid-trip, we canceled those rooms and started heading north on Interstate 35 toward Wichita. Frantically all the time. I forget who was actually making the phone calls, because somebody's usually doing that for Dave, trying to find us hotel rooms. Meanwhile, these humongous supercells had gone up to our east of Interstate 35. And again, another incredible lightning displays going on, just lighting up. It was almost like daytime a few times. I remember everything that was going on. And we finally found some hotel rooms in Park City, Kansas, and rolled into the parking lot with bleary eyes at 2:15.
2:15 in the morning. And if I could interject quickly, I remember on that drive, so this is the point where I started getting really sick, like I was getting under the weather. So thinking, oh, we'll just drive for a few hours and land at a hotel, I took some cold medicine, and you all kind of let me sleep for an hour or two, and so I missed all of these storms developing. And I remember I woke up and was like, what is going on? We're surrounded by supercells and all this lightning, and I mean, I obviously woke up real fast, but that was a wild night.
It was.
Yeah, and I believe I was in the car with you, Adrian, and for those that weren't driving, the lightning show was incredible, and it showed us some magnificent structure on some of these supercells.
Yes,
best
it was
structures I've ever seen.
Yeah, to our right, I think I remember. Yeah.
To our south, yeah. And it was amazing to watch, and I really want to see that type of structure in the daytime.
Yes.
After seeing that, it really just whetted my appetite,
Yeah, well, I remember I was driving, so I didn't get a chance to see a lot of that, again, except out of the corner of my eye. Especially when I was fighting to keep both eyes open as we were rolling up the road. By the way, you can tell when the drivers are getting sleepy is when they start talking on the radio to each other.
Right.
And we're not talking about weather or anything. We're talking about anything we can think of to keep our minds and our eyes open.
That's probably what I should have done, because if I can recall, I'm pretty sure I was the one making the hotel arrangements that particular night, and also navigating for, I think, Dave in my van to try to get us to the new hotel in Park City. And I was just so wiped out that I started nodding out, and I had to keep pinching myself to stay awake since I was playing navigator.
Yes, the other job of the navigator, especially whoever's riding shotgun, is to keep the driver awake. So.
Even if it means a slug in the face.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, my quote from my next paragraph in the write-up after we got in that night basically says, after a quick nap that did not qualify as a night's sleep, we piled back into the vans.
Yep.
And that next day, which was, I forget, what's that, Tuesday? I lost track of my days here. We headed east through eastern Kansas, and Dave took us through Joplin, Missouri, which was just about a little over a year after the tornado blasted through there. The EF5 went through there, and it made an impression on me. I'll just what do you guys, Adrian, what was your impression of that?
It was shocking. I mean, it was what I had expected to see after just seeing the pictures in the media. But even after a year later, it was incredible to see just how much hadn't yet been rebuilt. And I can't remember what direction we were going in. I'm going to assume east at that point. But we went from one area where there was hardly anything except for just debris and maybe some slates where there were buildings before, and then all of a sudden it was like we were in a forest. There were trees everywhere, and so of course we had just passed the edge of the tornado path, and that was pretty wild to see, just the stark difference between where the path the tornado was and what was hardly touched. It was like night and day. Like somebody had just taken a lawnmower directly through the middle of the city, and everything else on either side was untouched.
Right. Yeah, and the really touching part is seeing those empty slabs, empty foundations sitting there, and you're like, all right, it's been a year and a half. You see all this like, oh, we're going to rebuild Joplin. Home Depot went in and gave them all. You're like, all right, there's going to be like rebuilding houses. There'll be some houses without the shingles back on it yet, but you really don't understand until there you go, great picture up there right now. Until you really see these twisted trees, these old power poles that were just twisted. I mean, you don't think a tree can get twisted like that, and then rubble. Yeah, that's a big part.
So I remember this tree leaving an impression on me because, clearly it's stripped of its leaves, stripped of its smaller limbs and smaller branches, and someone or maybe a group of people painted it, and it's beautiful. And I took a lot of pictures of this one tree, I remember.
Right.
I have a similar one, and that was probably one of my favorite things to see as well.
Yeah. And it's really shocking because you're out there, you're like, oh, I want to see this tornado. Oh, I want to see this. And obviously, we'd love to see one in the middle of a field not hitting any buildings. But that's not always the case. You might be in that situation where you're the first responder. And
right.
One thing that Dave does a good job about is teaching his students, look, we're out there, and you might be the largest adrenaline high you've ever seen before or you've ever witnessed before. But if it comes to action and we need to go help, we're cutting it off. We're going to help. We're going to be the first ones there. We have communication capabilities with ham radio and others, and we're going to be there to help. I know I'm CPR certified, and I can teach CPR to people. And I know Dave and I are going to try to set up a class for this new crew going out because I think that's just as important. Being able to track these storms is one thing, but being able to react in a devastating situation like that is a different thing, and we're going to be prepared.
Right, right. And it's always good to have contingency plans like that in the background. But on a larger note, of course, that's another reason why it's important to learn about how to better forecast these storms. Because that particular tornado, and not only forecast, but then get the warning to the people. That particular tornado, a lot of folks were surprised by it. The warnings, they didn't get the warnings, or they didn't heed the warnings. It didn't look like a standard storm. The rain, it was a rain shaft that hit it. It was rain wrapped. So there's lots of reasons why that there's still work to be done, and that's a good thing for storm chasers who are planning to be meteorologists to realize.
Oh yeah, and I think part of the issue was there was an earlier tornado warning that went off, and the sirens reacted to that one, even though the tornado warning was way up north in the county. And after the sirens went off the second and third time, people didn't listen to them, and that's one of the issues we're facing nowadays. Is all right, those false alarms are going to convince people nothing's going to happen. I mean, we heard one in Guyman, Oklahoma, several times.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So there are a lot of issues there, but it was a learning experience and obviously sobering for all of us as we went through there. But even so, we weren't done that day either.
Nope.
We thought we were.
After we left Joplin, we kept heading east through Missouri, and there was a possibility we saw in the models and stuff that we could run into some storms. We really didn't pay much attention to them. I don't think after that point. And we stopped in Sykeston, Missouri, because we all wanted to eat at Lambert's Cafe. And for those of you, if you don't know about Lambert's Cafe, that's the home of the famous throwed rolls.
And I do have to mention that we were 12 for 12. All 12 of us caught our roll. Because I was keeping track. And as the person threw them down the line, we all caught it.
Well, we do have, we have fitness requirements for our chasers. So
fitness and coordination.
You have to be able to catch a soft roll of bread to go storm chasing.
Not only soft, but softball size too. So hopefully we'll get a chance, and other chase tours or chase trips will get a chance to go there. But it's just a family-style restaurant, great place to eat. But.
And I'm going to show this picture to help you transition into what you're about to say, because there's the restaurant sign, Lambert's, and there's your butt.
And so some storms we noticed when we parked the vans and walked inside. It had a little bit of a wait to get in because, of course, seating 12 people is one thing. But we noticed that there were some storms off to the north, and so we kind of kept an eye on radar and stuff. And while we were sitting there, we ordered our food, and it just comes family style. Just come dump these big containers on the table in front of you, and grab what you want and everything. So, but I kept looking outside, and there was a couple of flagpoles outside, and the flags were pointing straight into the storm. So what does that mean? Inflow.
Inflow.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, I looked around. No Dave. He's gone. Okay? And so eventually, everybody started going outside. Just one and two at a time started leaving and going outside. And all of a sudden, we made the decision, we need to go. We need to get in the vans. So we all had to go in and pay. And as I remember right, they didn't take plastic. I think they needed cash.
Yes, it was cash only. So we all had to run to the ATMs that they, of course, have lined in the lobby.
Yes, which is another way they make money, of course.
And a couple of us, I remember it was like you had to make the decision. While waiting for all the checks to come, it was like, do you wolf down all of your food or do you just get it boxed up? And I looked at Kevin Myatt, who was sitting next to me, and he had ordered frog legs, and he was like, you don't eat frog legs cold. You don't box up frog legs. So he and I just looked at each other, and it was like, go. And I remember just like eating as fast as I could, and he's eating as fast as he could. And we finished our food. It didn't feel great, but we finished our food, and people got everything boxed up, and we made it out of there just in time.
Yes, we did. And I know I ate, but I don't remember what I ate or what it tasted like.
I just remember. Go ahead, Chris. I think you're about to say what I'm about to say.
I was going to say I do know that Dave never ate his, so I boxed his up, which happened to be frog legs, and took them to him. And after we got stopped later on, he stopped by the side of the road. He said it was the first time he's ever stopped by the side of the road watching supercells at night, eating tornadic supercells and eating things.
Yep. Yeah. He said it was like a dream come true.
Yeah. And one of the most memorable things I took from that, and I think I was in Dave's car for that leg of the trip, but we were coming down the road, and we were about 40 minutes out, and we see this smoke coming up, and we all know we're about to stop. So I was like, barbecue, that's what that smoke is. No, it was some sort of forest fire that's going on. I think this is a really dry year, which might be worth talking about a bit later, because that might have been one of the reasons we didn't see quite as much action. But there was several forest fires out there, and the smoke was going straight up. And as we approached, all of a sudden a storm started going up to our north. We saw that wind change with the smoke in the background. And Dave mentioned that.
Yeah, go ahead. Awkward silence. Okay, I'll pick it up. But yeah, it was kind of our first tip-off that these storms coming might have more punch to them when we saw that wind shift in the smoke plume.
Yep, exactly so. So I'm gonna speed this up so we can finish this off. I'd like to get this done by 9:30 our time. But what we did was we had to get out of there because the storms were coming in, and again they were looking pretty mean. So we retreated west from Sikeston and eventually found a spot well west of town where we just stopped and watched again another incredible nocturnal lightning display. I actually I didn't take this picture, but I grabbed this from my video, and I'll show it here. Come on, got to get it show up here. All right, here we go. This is looking back at Sikeston. This is the wall cloud that was literally over the town that we had just left, and it was backlit by lightning and lit by underneath by the town lights. So what we actually heard and found out later on was that there was an EF2 tornado east of Sikeston that killed a couple of people, 3 people actually, that night while we were watching the storm.
And here's the radar capture where you can see where we were, and there's Sikeston, and then that tornado was in Dealstadt. That's where the people were killed under that warning.
Yeah.
Right. So we wound up, running from that storm, and there was a lot of coordination going on between vans in that storm. I remember because we had all eyes. This is another thing to keep in mind. All eyes need to be out of the van, watching storms and watching what's going on, and we were communicating on all the radios that we had. So just to make sure we got out of there safely. and then we found a place to. And I remember also watching the lightning, the thunder was so loud it sounded like artillery, just almost continuous.
Yes, I remember. I remember that.
That's a great picture.
This was another one, Jamie, where we wish we could have seen it in the daytime because we could have really seen the structure if it was light out.
Right.
And that was a C text, if I remember correctly, or if that. You know, it was very small chance of a severe storm in that setup. I think they were talking about just multi-cells, if not single cells. And all of a sudden, the wind picked up and had some rotation.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jamie. I've had some really good chasing luck on C-Tex days, by the way.
Yeah.
So.
I think Kevin Myatt earlier that day had also mentioned something, you know, about the Missouri boot heel for whatever reason being almost kind of like a very small scale tornado alley for whatever reason, and I think that was earlier on in the day when we were still like, yeah, it'd be cool if we saw storms, but you know, not very likely. And then lo and behold, we get chased out of dinner, literally.
Yes, we did.
Speaking of Kevin, didn't we wind out going through his hometown later that night?
Good segue, because that's where we spent the night. It was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kevin grew up. And of course, that was another well after midnight arrival after we had a short night, short night's sleep the night before because we were avoiding storms. So. Actually, because we were planning to stay in southeastern Kentucky and kind of go back through that direction back to Blacksburg. That didn't work out. So we wound up in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and then wound up crossing I-40 again, all the way back to Blacksburg.
Through Tennessee.
And on an unusual note, wound up getting in Blacksburg after dark that day because we try to get there normally about midday for people that need to catch rides. So we're not able to do that particular trip. So that kind of wraps the day-to-day stuff. Just in the interest of kind of cutting time out, because we had so much happen on this, we could talk for probably another hour easily on all the details of this trip. Let me just ask a couple specific questions here, and I'll start with Adrian. What was your favorite part or your favorite day of this trip?
Probably the very first chase day. I actually remember, and for everyone else, that was the cell that we first caught in western Oklahoma that we had to bail off of because it was getting too close to Oklahoma City. We ended up seeing the tornado backlit by the lightning later on. I remember Dave asking me about 3 or 4 days into the trip if that particular day, or really anything of the second trip that I'd been on, the 2012 trip, was better than the 2011 trip. And I told him that day blew all of the 2011 trip out of the water. There were things about it in terms of how quickly, things escalated, and then each day got a little bit less exciting, at least in my opinion, from that first chase day. But that first chase day was probably one of the best days of my entire life. I saw things that I never thought that I would see.
Cool. Jamie, how about you? What was your favorite part of that trip?
I'd have to agree wholeheartedly with Adrian there. The one thing that really stuck with me, and to this day remains one of my favorite chasing days for this reason, is we caught that cell coming out of a bathroom of a convenience store. We had a bathroom brick. We looked up. We saw this little thing that was trying to press through the cap, and it did. And we went from there. Went about 5 miles outside of town, watched it for about an hour and 15, hour and a half. I know Mississippi State rolled up. Our friend from my buddy from King George, he rolled up while we were sitting there, and we just followed that thing until we couldn't follow it anymore. And I think that was the most exciting part of the trip. You saw every life cycle of a supercell, and the only thing we really missed was a daytime tornado on that day. So, yeah, definitely one of the best chasing days I've had.
Cool. Catherine, how about you?
Well, it's unanimous that day one was pretty spectacular. I remember I think we chased for like 8 or 9 hours straight. And from the perspective of the veterans teaching the newbies or teaching the students, that day, I mean, the students were able to see, funnel clouds, wall clouds, hail shafts, rain shafts. We almost got hooked, teaching moment. The tornado after dark, that's a teaching moment, and because we were so close to it. because it kind of popped up unexpectedly. And the long day of chasing, you kind of got everything there is to experience in a storm chase in that one day. And I think it was great for everybody.
Right, and I agree. And I think overall for me, it was such a contrast to the first 2012 trip, which unfortunately wasn't very active, that it was literally night and day. There was so much going on almost every day. Every day that we chased, we did at least see a severe warning storm. It might not have been that impressive, but we did see, a severe warning storm. Even that one that was dying in the Oklahoma Panhandle was warned. So I thought it was pretty impressive. Well, let me kind of close things up here with a request, and that is to ask each of you your favorite go-to website when you're forecasting severe weather. So, Catherine, I'll start with you this time.
Okay. So, and I'm sure Jamie and Adrian, I apologize if I steal your answer, but the Storm Prediction Center is probably my top one when we're storm chasing, and every phase of storm chasing and forecasting, you can use the Storm Prediction Center. They have model data if you're forecasting a couple days beforehand, kind of morning of, we're reading the convective outlooks. A couple hours before storm initiation, we're reading any MDs that are coming out, any watches, and then they of course have the mesoanalysis, so we can look at all the. Can you still hear me? Am I still here?
You broke up there for a little bit on my end.
Am I still good? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
And then, of course, once storms are firing, you've got the mesoanalysis. You can look at all the parameters and figure out exactly where you want to go and what you want to do, and you just learn so much from using that site. It's great.
Okay, good. Thank you. How about you, Jamie? What's your go-to website?
I anticipate someone picking up the SPC, so I figured I'd go different. And I actually use, and maybe not on this trip, but I've learned to use it as of late, the College of DuPage weather site's an awesome site. And they have every parameter you need, and it's usually my second or third stop right after the SPC site. So I really like the College of DuPage weather site, and here soon I'm hoping to like the Virginia Tech meteorology site.
Hey.
It's currently under construction, so that's a shameless plug, but I'll end there.
Okay. Okay.
I also didn't choose the SBC since I figured somebody else probably would. But my favorite site, or one of my go-to sites, is Earl Barker's Weathercast page. And the first time that I had actually ever used that particular site was on my very first storm chase. And I could be a little bit biased in that the central U.S. severe weather charts are essentially only for the central U.S., and I now live in Nebraska. So that works out very nicely for me.
There you go.
In terms of looking at things. But I think it's just really easy to find what you need to look for. There's pretty much everything under the sun that you could ever need in terms of your weather forecasting. So that's why it's pretty much always a go-to for me.
Cool. Cool. And one of the ones, I think Catherine mentioned it in her email to me, one of the ones that I like to go to, especially when you're on limited bandwidth and and it's hard to load pictures and graphics and stuff, you can go to it's kamala.cod.edu, and you can get, and there are other sites that do it too, but you can get text output from all the forecast offices. Anywhere in the U.S. you can look at forecast discussions, hazardous weather, outlooks, all those things, and it's all in text. It's very little graphics, so it loads a lot faster. So that helps when you're in a. And by the way, you can't always count on having good, strong signal out there either, right?
We learned that in Oklahoma.
Exactly. So, well, we're coming up on almost an hour and a half here. I probably want to do a wrap here pretty quick. Any last-minute comments from any of the panel?
Yeah, well, we teased it a bit, but I have a little bit of dirt on the 2015 chase if you want me to spill a little bit. I know everybody's been waiting for it. So these are all just nasty rumors, but we had over 45 people interested in this upcoming chase, which is just insane to think about, because I know in 2012 we were begging people to go. In fact, I think we had a high school student or two attend, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
We also are going to be taking two trips with three vehicles, trying to really accommodate as many as we can. The first one's going to leave around May 18th to return right after Memorial Day. on May 29th. And we'll also be taking a second trip out June 1st throughout the 12th or so. So very similar to the chase dates for this 2012 two chases that we had. And there will be more meeting, or there will be a meeting this Thursday. Dave will announce it to everybody that goes over this stuff and more. And for everybody, I know we haven't talked about it, but the cool van driver, he's back. So beware.
The cool van driver. All right.
Oh yeah, you want to be in it. So
it's not as good as the sexy van that we had, Catherine.
That's right. The sexy van with the mezzanette that wasn't plugged in, but details.
We won't even get into the Dave Carroll Love Advice van that was going down the road of Oklahoma.
That was on the 2012. That was after the big Texan dinner. I don't know if he was feeling emotional from all that food or what, but yeah, the girls were getting some love advice from Dave Carroll.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what he said, but I guess it'll remain a mystery.
Yeah, I think it probably ought to.
It will remain a mystery, right, Adrian?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Any other last-minute thoughts before we wrap this up? Yes? No? Maybe?
I'll just say that to anyone watching who is thinking about or kind of on the fence of going, if you can make it happen, and barring you're not afraid of storms in any capacity, you need to go, because the experience that you will gain both in the storms and forecasting, and also the friendships that you make, are absolutely invaluable. So I would say if you're thinking about going, you're kind of on the fence, go. That would be my advice.
Okay. Well, just as a tease for the next one, the first 2013 trip panel discussion will be scheduled sometime in January. I haven't got the dates locked down. I do have some folks tied in that will be veteran student chasers that were on that chase that will be on that panel, so I'll work out times and let you know about that. And then the second 2013 chase, I'm actually going to shift gears because of the significance of that with the El Reno tornado and all that happened, actually the first known storm chaser deaths and all the stuff that went on. We're actually going to get the leaders of that trip together. So it'll be, hopefully we'll be all the drivers and the leaders on that trip, and I'm working on that too. We'll get that scheduled hopefully by the end of January. So that's what I know coming up. And then sometime after that, we'll do the 2014. Right, Jamie?
Oh, yeah. Good trip.
All right. Hey, it's really good seeing you guys again, and it's, we'll just have to kind of get together and do some more chasing and talking about old chasing just for the heck of it.
I agree.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds good to me.
All right. You guys have a good night, and if I don't talk to you before then, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. It's good seeing you guys.
All right. Out here.
See ya.